Hello, welcome to WordPress Accessibility Day. My name is Danielle, and I am the founder of Overnight Website and Kinetic Iris Web Development Studio. Thank you for joining us for Accessibility is a Partnership that Requires Communication with Maxwell Ivy. Max has transformed himself from a totally blind, failed carnival owner to a respected amusement equipment broker and is known as the Blind Blogger. He has written 4 books, been interviewed on over 350 podcasts, started teaching people how to be great guests, began booking people on shows, and eventually started his own podcast called What's Your Excuse? Please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A tab next to the video, and we'll answer them at the end of the session, and use the ideas section to chat with other attendees. So, Max, take it away.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak to my community, that being the WordPress users and developers. So thank you for this. And I want to let people know that while we want the internet to be 100% accessible, I'm not here to slap your hands or scare you that you're going to get sued. I'm here to encourage you to see accessibility as something that has a value to you, to your business, to your profitability, to your competitive advantage, but also that you don't have to do this alone. Because I've realized that creating accessibility on a website is hard. For your information, because I think it's relevant to this conversation, when I first got online in 2007, I did not have access to WordPress. So I had to teach myself how to code HTML. I had to write Java, and I had to find people who would loan me Java and PHP code to put into my website to make it do things I wasn't capable of making it do. And I did that for 5 years. And so I've got a lot of built up horrible code in my background that eventually will all eventually be updated to not only be pretty code, but be accessible. So I understand what it is to be a website owner, to be a small business owner, to have limited skills, ability, talent, or money, and then to have somebody come along and go, oh, wait a minute, your website isn't accessible. You need to make it accessible. So I just want y'all to know that I understand where you're at, and I'm going to do my best to make you feel better about the process, and challenge you, encourage you to take action towards making your products and services more accessible. So first, it isn't easy. If we just take accessibility for screen reader users, and that's not even the entire visually impaired community that will use a website. If we just go to screen reader users, and I'm doing that because that's my area of experience, if we just go there, we have 2 different operating systems. We have Windows and Mac, which I'm sure y'all are both aware of that. But within those 2 operating systems, you may have 2 different screen reader options. So for Mac, you have VoiceOver. If you create a program or a website for the iOS devices, which is Mac's mobile option, then you have a whole nother standards or rules that you have to code by to make your app accessible. And you look at Windows, you have Microsoft. And with Microsoft, you have JAWS for Windows or NVDA. These are all screen readers for people who have no vision or very little, or at least have so little that they have to depend on a text-to-speech option. So, and once you get past Microsoft, you also have Android. And Android is now doing much better with their TalkBack app, to where it is becoming accessible, at least with sighted assistance during setup on quite a few things for the Android device. So Android is coming along. So you've got all these different platforms. In addition to that, you have different levels of visual acuity. Somebody that has a high level of vision may only need some small amount of screen reader accessibility. Somebody who has a real need for total screen reader use may have sighted assistance. And then even beyond the technology you have available to you and your ability, you have comfort level. So depending on the training you have received with your devices, or the training you have never received with your devices, that's going to affect how comfortable you are trying certain types of things or trying to figure things out, as opposed to requesting or even demanding that accessibility be addressed more fully. And then, and then you have to remember that even people that have the same visual acuity and the same disease, we're all still human beings. We are all still individuals who happen to have vision loss. So you could give two people with the exact same circumstances the exact same question, and they would find two different ways to arrive at the answer. So I just want to let y'all know, I understand that this is not easy, but just because it is challenging doesn't mean that we don't do it or that we can't do it. And because it is challenging, it gives us the opportunity to stand out until everybody else on the internet decides to come along and make their websites accessible. And by the way, I do want to applaud WordPress, because WordPress has done a lot in the area of making their platform and the apps that play on their platform accessible. And I have had very little real problems with anything from WordPress for the last 3 years. So I want to applaud WordPress for their investment, because not only do they spend a lot of time on the back end, they address this with people who want to create plugins, and they address this at every WordCamp session they've had for who knows how long now. So I want to give them their props. And so just because it's difficult, because a lot of people don't do it, it gives you a way to stand out. So think about this. There are roughly 1 billion people in the world that have a disability. I think it's probably about 350 million of those have a vision loss disability. So we're talking about a pretty big pool, and I'm sure you've already heard those numbers, but here's a number I believe you haven't heard. Only 3% of websites on the internet are accessible to the agreed upon standards for access. So that means that if you become one of those companies that has that level of access, that makes people like me, people with autism, deaf people, people in wheelchairs with motor issues, you make us feel welcome. We want to spend our money with you. And I am quite often spending time talking to business owners about how, as a rule, the disability community is very brand loyal. We will stick with companies that invest to show us that they appreciate our business and want us to be part of the solutions to make their products or services more user-friendly for us. We will tell our friends and our neighbors and our coworkers and our social media networks. And if we find something really good, we'll even tell our enemies about it. You know, because we just want to advocate. We want to help each other and help each other deal with our accessibility issues. So if you think about it, by making your product more accessibility, making your website more available, you're gaining an entire marketing department, thousands of people who won't have to be paid a dime to tell people how good you are. So it is hard, but there's a definite return on the investment. So I said that in my title that I was going to talk about a partnership. So I personally believe, and it's been proven out in my own life for years now, that we can only get so far with compliance. Even if we had a perfect set of standards, even if they were adopted on a global level, even if we had perfect enforcement of those laws, that would only get us so far, because there would still be a certain number of people who would either find a way to avoid the law or who would do just the bare minimum to avoid being penalized by the law. So I personally believe it's a lot, at least a good part of this means saying hello, this is who I am, these are my needs. I would really appreciate it if you could make this thing accessible. And so I want to share a couple of examples with you of experiences I've had with companies, a couple of them pretty large companies, actually. And just so y'all know, just so I don't get any trouble with WordPress, I do not have affiliate links for these people. I'm not getting paid by these people. I just mentioned them because they're part of the example. And I think that if people didn't know who I was talking about, the argument wouldn't make sense. So as a blind person that's been online, that's had a website for over 10 years, well, over 15 years now, I have been in a lot of situations where I just didn't have a way to make it do what I wanted it to. And that continues up to today. So what I usually do is, if I go to a company and I'm going to use their product or service, or I'm going to spend a lot of time on their website, I go and find the customer service person or the technical support person, and I send them an email and I say, hey, I'm Max Ivy. I'm totally blind. People know me as the blind blogger. I have a website and a podcast, and I'm planning on using your offering. I don't expect to have problems with it, but if I do, I would like you to know who I am, because I would hate for my first message to you to be me submitting one of those tickets saying that you got a problem. So that's where I usually start. And as a result, I've had a lot of great conversations with people on that side of the company. And I think a lot of it is because I reached out to them before I had a problem, and the conversation started off as friendly. And of course, if I understand if there are people watching who would take the alternate side of that position, but I really do believe we have to help them and they have to help us. And we can't do that unless we communicate and collaborate and work as partners, or at least try to. So about 6 years ago, I joined a platform called Nepris, which is a free online e-learning platform that connects teachers with professionals, experts, in order that they can come on Zoom or other virtual platforms and give talks to these teachers' classes. And I heard about it and thought that sounded cool. So I filled out the form to join the website, only to find out that very little of the website was accessible. So I sent them an email and explained my problem. And of course, the first problem was I could not create a profile. I couldn't tell people who I was, what my background was, or what my favorite topics to speak on were. And without that, they would have no way to know if they wanted to select me to speak to their kids or not. So they scheduled a Zoom call with me. We spent about 30 minutes discussing my background and what I wanted to speak about. They created a profile in an email document, sent it to me. I reviewed it, made a few corrections to it, sent it back to them. And so we got that up. They put the categories I wanted to speak to. And I was just so thrilled in 2018 when I finally got my first classroom booking. They wanted somebody to speak to a group of kindergartner and first grade students with special needs in Chicago. And I get the link, I click the button, I can't click the button. So I reach back out to them and go, hey. And so they asked me which time slot I wanted. They scheduled it. And they also told me, Mr. Ivy, when you get ready to give this talk, we're going to send you an email with a direct link to the Zoom room. And the reason for that is having a website where you deal with lots of young people, there are privacy issues, so they can't run Zoom just in Zoom. They have to run it within a secured platform on the back end. So they sent me the link. I logged on. I had a great conversation with the tech person for 15 minutes before I talked, and had a wonderful talk with the school kids in Chicago. And I felt just amazing after I finished that talk. And I was thinking, if I just gotten mad and went off and said, no, I'm not going to worry about this, or if I had decided this isn't important enough to me to want to be part of it, then I wouldn't have done it. But as a result, I've given over half a dozen talks on the platform. I've talked to school kids from elementary school to high school all over the country. And I even recently received an award from them for the talks I've given. And all of that stuff, now that I'm, working at being a speaker, all that stuff comes back to me now where, I can say, hey, I spoke to all these different school kids. So without letting these people know what my problem was and giving them an opportunity to fix it, I wouldn't have been able to use the platform. But now on the other side, though, is while we were doing it through what people would call a hack or a workaround, they had their people working on the back end to make it more accessible. So now there isn't a single part of their platform that isn't accessible. They did just merge with another company called Pathful. So perhaps as they merge the two systems, there'll be a few hiccups, but they understand my needs and the needs of other people like me. And the other thing that's been really cool is they have started an initiative to really invest in including more people with disabilities on both ends. They want more schools for the blind and other institutions that have young people with disabilities to be able to have access to these classroom lectures. And they also want to find more people with disabilities to give talks, because they realize there are literally thousands of us that have expertise, that have experience, that have lived experience that could help teach these kids, and they value that. So that was my first experience with NEPRIS. And like I say, it took a lot of communication, understanding communication, and they've gotten there. And now I'd say they're probably an example. Another experience I had was with a company called Podmatch, which is a place where people can find podcasts that want to book them on their shows. And it's run through artificial intelligence. And when I first started using it, it had two issues. The first issue was unlabeled buttons and unlabeled links. And we've all been there, where you end up having to count links just like you would count steps back in the old TV shows or movies in order to figure out, well, if I press this link, I get this page. So in this case, I had actually met the owner before he started the company, and we had been friends. So I reached out to him and I said, this is a real problem. And we talked about it. And even though his company has been growing really rapidly, he's been working hard to get the tech people to make more accessibility improvements and also to fix some of the stuff that was already there. But the other part of dealing with him is I learned a new expression. I learned about something called workflow. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but maybe you aren't. So the thing is sometimes a problem with a website is accessibility. But sometimes a problem with a website is workflow, because the person who designed it doesn't understand how a visually impaired person navigates a website, or they don't understand what a logical process would look like to you. And in this case, he has a system, a series of buttons that you push in order to book a conversation with somebody on the website. And I could never find the button that I needed, but I finally noticed that near that button was a button, or excuse me, I never found the button, but I noticed there was a button that said schedule appointment. So I clicked that button. And after I clicked that button, another button popped up that said request connection or accept connection, which was the first step in the process of booking an interview. So as somebody on that side, on the developer's side of building this website, they didn't understand that didn't make sense to me as a screen reader user because of how I navigate websites. So I've had to explain that to him. I've also talked to him about how not having the option to click a mouse button is very troubling for people with screen reader users, and that if you're going to use mouse clicks, there really has to be a keyboard command option that's an equivalent to it, and they have to be made available in a way where I can go somewhere and get a list of all those keyboard commands so that when I visit your site, my experience is friendly and fun, and I can focus on meeting people and making the connections and booking the interviews, as opposed to, oh man, what do I do next on this website? So he did take some of my suggestions, and they're continuing to invest in the website and upgrade the accessibility. It's just they are a small team, but that's one of the reasons why I'm impressed by them, because we all know there are lots of websites being run by huge companies that are not accessible. All we have to do is look at the headlines to see some of the companies that have been sued for lack of internet accessibility. And then the third example I wanted to share with y'all was with the organization Podcast Movement. They run a very prestigious national conference on podcasting, something I wanted to attend and actually wanted to speak at. But when I visited the website and went to the forum was not accessible. There was selection boxes, but they weren't the kind that my screen reader could navigate easily. I couldn't select something and have it stay where I put it and then press enter or the control on it and have it select the item. And I was very disappointed because the deadline was coming up to apply. But I reached out to them. I explained my problem, and they had somebody export the application to a Google Docs form. Of course, I had to explain to him, hey, Google Docs isn't a whole lot more accessible than your website. So, but I was able to export the Google Docs file to a text file, and I was able to enter all my information and send it to him in that file He navigated it, entered all my stuff into the form on the website. He also helped me update it so that I could include my photos and my links. And the fact that I want to give a keynote, if the opportunity comes up for me to give a keynote plus my workshop. So, and the really cool thing about these guys is they want me to let people know that they did not intentionally try to exclude people with disabilities. They just did not realize what they were doing. And I find that quite a lot when I talk to people about their websites, but they did not know, but they did promise me that by the next time they have a call for speakers or a call for any type of opportunity, they will have a accessible form. They asked me for my advice, and I told them, keep it simple. Use a Google form and leverage the work they've already done on accessibility, because I've never run across a Google form I couldn't complete. So these are 3 examples where it wasn't because I said, you have to do this or else. I didn't threaten to sue them. I didn't threaten to go on social media and call them out. I just said, hey, I would really like to be part of your company and use your website, and these are my problems, and could you help me? So we were able to get that done. Now, like I say, it does require that both sides want to communicate and collaborate, and there are going to be times where the website owner basically just blows you off. They do ignore you. They don't pay attention. And sadly, when that happens, then you have to fall back on compliance. But my daddy taught me that that more often than not, I can get what I want with a smile, a handshake, and asking nicely than I can by telling people they're a big meanie, and if they don't do it, or they better do it or else. So, and that leads me to something I have also found out from the companies I've spoken with over the last few months, is I like to ask people, do you have any visually impaired people using your website or using your product or service? And in the last 2 months, I've had four conversations with that particular question. And every single time the answer is, we don't know. And then I have to ask them, well, why don't you know? Of course, I don't say it mean like that, but I do have to ask them. And their answer is always the same, because no one living with vision loss or any other type of disability ever tells us that they're using our product. They never go, hey, I'm here and your product is great, or I'm here and your product is horrible. He said, people that I've talked to say we just don't hear from the visually impaired users. And I would be willing to bet that that's probably the same for users of all types of disabilities. Now, I understand that deciding whether or not to tell people you have a disability is a personal matter, and I'm not going to say everybody should do it the way I do it. I will say it works the way I do it, and I spend a lot less time cursing and pulling up my hair than I would have otherwise. But I understand that a lot of people just want to be able to be treated like everybody else as if they don't have a disability. So I understand that. In this case, though, I am trying to get things moving. I'm trying to get things to become more accessible. I'm really trying to get the developers on the platform and outside the platform to decide that they want to make their websites accessible. And that's fine. If it's because they're scared, that's fine. If it's because they have a real true desire, that's fine. If it's because they realize they can make more money, that's fine. I'm just trying to do my part here to make it easier on them, because this is hard and this is scary. So I've been working with people, trying to get them to make their websites more accessible based on what I know. And so if you own a company, you probably are asking yourself, but what if I don't have the ability to connect with somebody like Max? How do I create this partnership so that I actually create a accessible website from the beginning, so that the whole development process, from the idea to the design to the construction to the distribution to the growth and updating, everything along that path is accessible or updated so that it is. How do you do that? Well, there are quite a few places you can go. For starters, there are plugins and other automated overlays that you can install on your website that will offer some level of accessibility. And I'm not going to say that those things are wrong or that they're horrible. There are some that are better than others, but if you're going to use automation, please try to find one that is built by people that have disabilities, but they have a team, or they at least have a community of people where they can know what the most usual problems are and they can adapt for them, they can develop for them, they can figure out how to update your website. And if at all possible, a overlay or a plugin that includes human review along with the automated reviews and updates. So that's one way you can do it. That's easy, that's anonymous, and or it's at least a closed system where only a certain group of people are going to know about it. The other thing you can do is while we are scattered, and there are lots of us, there are various advocacy groups in the country that have people. Some places it's a team, some places it's email lists, but they have people that you can reach out to who can give you feedback on whether or not your website is accessible. So I would recommend groups. I'm not going to mention the group by name because I really don't want to start any. I don't really want to start any disagreements over which websites I mentioned and if I leave somebody out. But you can do a Google search and you can find those groups that can help you see if your website or product is accessible and give you ideas on how to fix it. The next thing you can do is you can create a team in-house. And it doesn't have to be a huge team. It does have to be a paid team. As for what you would pay them, I'll leave that up to you and them to negotiate. But it would be great if you had an internal team of people representing multiple disabilities who could give you regular feedback on what you're developing and how accessible it is or is not. And also give you their opinions on workflow, on does the way you interact with the website make sense in addition to accessibility? Because as I mentioned earlier, those are two separate things, but they're both a big part of whether somebody can enjoy using your website. In addition to that, make it easy for people to contact your technical support and your developer team. I understand that you don't want those people getting hundreds or thousands of emails, but possibly a place where the emails you do get can be curated into a bullet list of the most common concerns and then passed on to the developers. Reach out to individual users. If you are on the internet, you can see people that are doing great work. I mean, like, you just have to Google the blind blogger or what's your excuse, and you're going to find Max Ivy. And there are lots of other very talented creators who have disabilities, podcasters, authors, speakers, YouTubers, Instagrammers. So you can easily find people with disabilities and you can invite them to give you their opinion. And perhaps y'all can work out some sort of an affiliate arrangement or an endorsement schedule or something to where both sides get something out of it. So try to find ways for people like me to contact you so we can share our concerns, and consider reaching out to people like me, like many of the people that are going to speak during this accessibility day, and going, hey, we would love for you to give us your input. By the way, I just had an idea. Go to the list of speakers and just take down all of our names, and those who aren't interested can say no, and those who aren't interested can send me a message offline and tell me thanks, but no thanks. I hope I didn't just make somebody mad, but when ideas like that occur to me, I generally speak them. So there are lots of people speaking at this event who would be perfect for you to ask for our help to make your products more accessible and to avoid breaking things in a way that creates hard feelings and makes it hard for you to put it back the way it was. And again, make it easy for people to connect with you. Make it so that we don't have to own the product. We don't have to have a subscription. We don't have to have spent money. Just make it so we can reach out and go, hey, I didn't even get past the sign up screen and I already had trouble. Or I signed up, but I'm not enjoying my use. Is it possible you could address this, this, and this? Make it easy for us to connect with you. And on my website, the last thing I want anybody to do if they're thinking about hiring a public speaker or hiring a publicist, the last thing I want anybody to have to do is to have to dig to find my email address or my contact form. I want them to be able to find me right away. And as a business owner, considering how valuable accessibility can be to you, I wish more would think, yeah, I don't want to make it hard for people with disabilities to let me know that we could make this better. So advocacy groups, internal staffs, reaching out to influencers or other people, asking your staff member if they know any people with disabilities they could introduce you to, attending events like this where you can meet people and decide, hey, I'd like to know that person and have them be part of our team. That's all great stuff. And if you build it and you maintain it with accessibility, then it takes a lot less work once you get started. So I really hope that this is making sense to y'all and y'all are realizing that we can make our stuff accessible if we want to. And then if we decide to do it, we have the potential to reach new audiences that are going to stay with us as long as we continue to make them feel welcome. So I hope that does help you some. And really, it is a partnership. I mean, I could not do what I do without WordPress doing what they've done over the last 11 or 12 years. I think this is their 12th year now, because while I could use one of the other content management system websites, none of them are as much fun to use as WordPress. And if you notice there, I said fun, because I don't like to have to think about what I need to do next in order to update my website or create a new blog post or upload a video. I like to be able to go step, step, step without having to think about it at all. So I just want you to think about it. I don't expect you all to do it, but I really hope that you do. And if after hearing me speak, you decide, you know, I would like to try to make my website more accessible, then I'd like to hear what you do to make that happen. Be more than happy to provide any advice, opinions, or suggestions I can to anybody that sincerely wants to make their stuff better and make it more inclusive. So whether you're a big company, a small company, a sole entrepreneur, there are always ways to accomplish the difficult things. And accessibility is no different than trying to locate new customers, coming up with an elevator pitch, building an e-commerce store, or any of the other stuff we have to do in order to try to make money online. And if I have time, I would like to share just one more example, because it comes from a very small company. It comes from a company called Less Annoying CRM, which stands for Client Relationship Management. And I'm very big on business through creating and maintaining relationships as opposed to selling. But I send out a lot of emails and make a lot of phone calls, and it's hard to keep track of everything I've done. And I've looked for accessible programs and couldn't find one. And it turned out that they offer one. It's very friendly, very accessible. And the thing is, this company only has 19 employees, yet their product competes with Salesforce that has thousands of employees. This company only makes $3 million. I know I'm fixing to say only makes $3 million a year, or grosses $3 million a year, which I'm told is less than 1% of what Salesforce makes. But their website is clean, it's uncluttered, it's friendly. And even though they have to use a drag and drop, they went out and found an accessible drag and drop to include in the part of the website where you create your workflows for your own internal use. So it can be done. Please don't let the size of your company, please don't let your lack of ability or skills be an excuse to keep you from making your website accessible. Just remember, the more fun it is to use, the more people that will use it. The more people with disabilities believe we are included, the more money you have the potential to make. And since I'm hearing voices in my background, yeah, I assume that means I'm through.
You've got about 5 minutes left if you still had more to say.
No, I think I'm good. I think I'm good.
Awesome.
My speaking coach always says, Max, if you get to where you think you're through, then stop and give them a few more minutes of question and answer.
That's valuable advice for sure. I kept having questions to ask you, and then you kept answering them. It was an excellent presentation.
Well, thank you. I was really concerned about it. I have had these conversations with a lot of people over the last few years, but this is the first time I've given this talk, and I won't say that I was nervous because there are people who wouldn't believe me if I did, but I was at least concerned that I was giving a talk for the first time to an audience I really care about and really wanted to do well for.
Yeah, well, and you can tell. So we do have one question so far that came in.
Okay.
They said, I love your approach that you help website owners do better with a smile and a handshake, but will you share what is the single most frustrating thing that you encounter on websites and what would be a better experience for you?
Well, I appreciate that because that sounds like that's coming from a developer or a website owner who wants to know. So I would say the most aggravating thing that happens to me is when I go to a website to fill out a form and the forms either aren't labeled or the label is off to the side and it isn't connected to the field. So just to explain this for somebody who isn't really sure what I'm talking about here. When you use a screen reader, your general ways of navigating the screen are tab and shift tab. And in a perfect world, a form would announce the field along with any instructions for that field as you come to it. So like if I press tab and the first field wants my first name, it should say first name. But quite often it doesn't. It'll just say edit or blank or empty or something on, and I will have to use my arrow keys and go word by word or line by line to find where I need to put the information in. So if you're using a form, be sure to test your form. Have somebody who uses a screen reader test it for you and make sure that it's not just accessible, because as I said earlier, there can be things that are accessible that are not workable, that have poor workflow design. So if you're using a form, have it tested. Send it to somebody and ask them if they'll fill it in for you, and tell them if they do, you'll give them a social media shout out or something to make it worth their while. But on top of that,
code.
There you go, a discount code. Exactly. But beyond that, just to finish off the thought about forms, the other thing that just really ticks me off, and I don't get mad about much, is if I manage to make my way to the end of the form, and then for some reason, the way they have coded the submit button, I cannot press it. I can't tell you how aggravating it is. And the longer the form is, the madder I get. You've been there too, yes?
Yes. I am a web developer, so I test very many forms, and I do not enjoy it at all.
Yeah, so that's one of the worst, and especially because you're already invested. And it's also the worst for the website developer, because think about it this way. If I spend that time and get to the end, and I do reach out to you, which there is no guarantee I will reach out to you. And if I do, there's no guarantee I won't use some negative language, let's say. But think about it from the point of view of your folks. Wouldn't it be easier for your folks to get an email from somebody that wasn't already wound up over an issue like this? I mean, it's in your best interest to test the website form or anything else on your website, because you eliminate aggravation, you avoid hurt feelings. And trust me, if any of you have watched any of these police incidents that escalate, quite often they escalate because the people involved are already upset. And as a webmaster, we really want to try to avoid making people upset without thinking about it or for no good reason. I mean, I'd really have to be convinced what their good reason would be to break something like the form. But, you're basically just saving your team a bunch of aggravation, and you may even be you could even be protecting your brand by avoiding things like broken forms and missing alt tags and links that I don't know are there because they have no alt information. My screen reader can't find the link, So these things, they're small things individually, but they add up. They're cumulative. They show disrespect. And the more of them there are on your website, your blog, your podcast player, etc., the more likely it is that your tech support people are going to get a phone call or they're going to get an email, and they're going to walk away from their computer and throw something or go to the break room and get coffee because it's like, man, what did I do?
No, that's a great point. And I'm really curious how certain things would perform, like save as you go and other things like if you're having trouble with this form kind of thing. Like I wonder how those can be implemented to aid rather than interrupt too.
Right. Well, I love save as you go, but there are a couple of issues with it for a screener user. One is I need to have a way of knowing that it's in play and a way to know when was the last time it updated, because quite often with those save as you go things, they don't report to the notifications settings on my screen reader to tell me that something just popped up on the screen. So knowing that it's being saved or having the last saved time marker that most of them use next to the submit button are very helpful things. Just make it easy for me to know if it's being saved or not, and then be able to find the place on the screen where I can see how long ago did it save it. Another thing that's really good, and this is in addition to save as, is I can't tell you how many times I fill out a form and I don't get an error message, and I press submit and it goes, everything goes, but it never tells me that I was successful. It doesn't say thank you. It doesn't say your submission was received. It doesn't say nothing. And sometimes I can go to the URL, and at the end of the URL, you can see where the URL is changed because your submission went through. But most of the time you can't. And if they don't send you a confirmation email, because a lot of them don't automatically do that, and a lot of them don't have that checkbox to select to have a copy sent to yourself. So if you don't know that it's done this, and you have two choices. You can either sit there and wait. You can try entering the information again. You can get mad and leave. So there really aren't good outcomes for the other person if I don't know what I'm doing based on the information that I can find on the screen. And of course, with a screen reader, that is text characters, that is images that have been assigned alt text. Those are buttons that have been assigned alt text. Those are links that have been actually given names instead of unnamed link. So yeah, but I love saved as, especially on websites like I'm part of Speaker Hub, which is a great site for finding opportunities to give talks. In fact, that's how I found out y'all were holding this event. So it's a really cool place. But their save as is one of those things. Half the time I end up, and I've talked to them about this, but they're based in another country. But half the time after I'm through, I send them an email. I go, hey, I just did this, this, and this. Did it actually get done? Because I can't tell.
Right. So having good support is important.
Yes.
So we have a quick question, and then we have another more in-depth question. So we're going to try to get through them quick. So we have, what screen reader technology do you use most often and why? That's our first.
Okay. It depends on what I'm trying to do, because my Mac and my iOS devices display things differently. So in some cases, it'll work good on the Mac, but not on the iPad or iPhone. And in other cases, it'll work good on the iPhone, but not on the Mac. So generally, social media works better on my iOS devices, and generally, more complicated websites work better on my desktop. I also have, thanks to Computers for the Blind, I also have a Windows computer that I use, and I'm using it actually right now because StreamYard doesn't play well with my Mac.
Got it.
Sorry about the answer. It was a little.
I wonder if the Windows works better for government sites since they're usually more outdated.
I try to stay off of government sites, but I think you're onto something.
So our next question is, do you use the Classic Editor plugin in WordPress or the block editor to write posts? And if there was a list of top things you would like to see fixed in the admin, what would be on that list?
Okay, I'm going to start by saying something that may appear to be negative about WordPress, but it's honest, and that's my number one guiding principle. I was not happy when Gutenberg came around and we started adding all this block editor stuff. Okay, I do run the classic editor on my websites. Unfortunately, one of my websites has been out there so long that even when I run the classic editor, the block stuff still shows up.
Right.
But I have figured out how to navigate the block stuff. I don't mind having to use the, move block up and move block down buttons. And I've even figured out that if I stop using double line returns, that it'll stop adding paragraphs where I don't want them. So, but in general, I'm very happy that they added the option of going back to the classic editor. I think for most people that are running a 1-page or less than 5-page website through their WordPress account, that classic editor is the best, simplest way to do it. And of course, you have to decide on what plugins you're going to use beyond the classic editor. So, but I'm still very happy with WordPress because trust me, I coded my own code for 7 years, and I still have nightmares. So I'm very happy with WordPress.
So you're optimistic in the direction it's taking. If there were stuff that you want to see fixed, what would be on that list?
I would say maybe limiting or decreasing the number of items on the same screen together. I find that one of the things that bothers me as a screen reader user is when I have too many options on the same screen together. And like, for example, when I open my WordPress dashboard, there's always like the thanks for using WordPress. There's always like, there's stuff off to the top left and the bottom right that really I don't have a need to see as I'm editing a post or a page. Right. So I'm thinking if there was a way, maybe in Classic Editor, where I could press a key command to just show me the stuff that's in play for what I'm doing, I think that would be really cool. Because when you're using a screen reader, the more objects there are on the screen, the longer it takes you to find what you want to find, and the longer it takes you to navigate back and forth between those things. For example, I have a podcast. I produce a podcast, and I've helped other people start podcasts. So I have the PowerPress player from Blueberry.com installed on my websites, and it works great. It's very accessible, both on the back end and when people come to listen to the podcast. But I have to go from the, let's say, upper third all the way down to near the bottom, and I have to go back and forth in order to get the file uploaded to Blueberry, the URL from their site verified. So it's just one of those things. If there was less real estate to navigate, that would be a big improvement in my opinion. But
right. And back to that workflow that you were talking about, if you do things in order, put it in the order on the screen so you don't have to keep going back and forth like that.
Uh-huh. Yes.
So we have a quick follow-up question. We have about 2 minutes left regarding the screen reader technology. Are you using JAWS, NVIDIA, or the built-in operating system accessibility tools? Now for Mac, that question is a little different because they have different programs, but which, are you using something that you install, or are you using built-in stuff?
Okay. I'm using VoiceOver on my Mac, iPhone, and iPad, which those are built in, but I personally think we gloss over the amount of time you invest in configuring the accessibility options to your particular taste.
Right.
And then, of course, on the Windows computer, I have played around with Narrator. I haven't really been all that happy with it, but I think it's because I'm kind of old school, so it hasn't really done anything for me. I have yet to try NVDA. I use JAWS for Windows, and I find it pretty good. It's just that sometimes, and this is a Windows thing more than a JAWS thing, actually. Sometimes it just seems like my stuff is always updating when I don't want it to update.
Right. Right. Well, awesome. I mean, thank you so much for all of the information you gave. It is all so great. Thank you for your perspective, and definitely check out the bio that has all of your info to read more about you. It sounds like you have such a fascinating story, and I can't wait to read more about you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to that. And when you visit the website, please send me a message or send me an email, and it's just in case anybody else wants it. It's just ask@theblindblogger.net is where people can get me. And I love having conversations. As I tell people all the time, you don't have to want to buy something from me. You don't have to want to book me. You don't have to need to hire me to talk to me. Because I find it quite often those friendly conversations with no destination turn out to be the best things.
Love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for attending this session with Max Ivy. You can continue the conversation in the chat or on social media using hashtag WPA11YDay and hashtag WPAD2022. We also appreciate it if you go to wpaccessibility.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on their presentation. And stay tuned for our next round of lightning talks coming up next at 2 a.m. UTC, 9 p.m. Central. And while you're waiting, don't forget to visit our sponsors pages to grab virtual swag and enter for a chance to win great prizes. See you right here after the break.